You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and it is time once again to react, but this time to the final game of the 2024 season, as Super Bowl 59 has come and gone, and the Philadelphia Eagles were able to get the job done, taking down the Chiefs 40-22 in what was an absolute dominating fashion, and they were able to thwart the three-peat attempt of those Kansas City Chiefs. Jalen Hurts becomes the first quarterback to defeat an opposing quarterback that he had already played previously in a Super Bowl after losing in game number 1. So there was a lot of history to be made in this game, even without the Chiefs repeating here. There's a lot to take away. I invite you all to comment down below. I want to hear from you all. Reactions, thoughts, takeaways, sighs of relief for those of you that I know did not want to see that Chiefs three-peat happen. Fire away. I want to hear from you all. But before I get in, start breaking down some of my takeaways from this game, I just want to say shame on me, because I did not pick the Eagles to win this game, and I'm pretty upset with myself about it, because if you go back and if you have been watching the way I have talked about this Eagles for the better part of at least, I would say about 6-7 weeks now, however long the playoffs plus or almost 8 weeks now, playoffs plus the actual final 4 or so weeks of the season, I have looked at Philadelphia as the best team in the NFL. The roster construction has been unbelievably put together, and it showed towards the back half of that season and even throughout this playoff run as well, as it's been fairly dominant, if I do say so myself, for Philadelphia. I literally had Philadelphia ranked as the number 1 team in my power rankings, the final 4 weeks of power rankings that I did for literally an entire month, and that was even in that span where Philadelphia slipped up and lost that game to Washington when Jalen Hurts got knocked out early, and I caught a lot of flack for keeping them there. A lot of people telling me I was wrong, but I stayed true to them all the way until right before the very end. And I went with the safe pick. I'm so mad at myself for not taking Philadelphia. But aside from that, I am excited that Philadelphia won this football game. That was the team that I wanted to see win, despite the fact that I took Kansas City to win the game. So I'm very happy with the result of this game here. I would have been fine either way, but I'm just mad at myself and kicking myself now, because in hindsight, this was inevitable. I was even at work telling people, this game goes one of two ways. Tight Chiefs win, or the Eagles are going to absolutely smack around the Chiefs, and that's exactly what we got. So this final that we got, not super surprising to me. But again, I invite you all, fire away. I want to hear from you all. I do have a question for you all, though, with this 40-22 loss from Kansas City. Does this loss, the second blowout loss in a Super Bowl game for Patrick Mahomes, affect his overall legacy? The conversation was strong coming into the Super Bowl, of course. Talks of a dynasty comparisons. Talks of Patrick Mahomes, the up-and-coming greatest of all time, going to dethrone Tom Brady, who is the consensus greatest of all time, with a second blowout loss in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady never losing a game by more than a possession in the Super Bowl himself. Mahomes now sitting with 2 blowout losses. Does that skew things in a way that, having lost to Brady in a Super Bowl, having lost to Brady in an AFC Championship, and now 2 losses that were just flat-out blowouts in the Super Bowl altogether, does that change the way we look at Patrick Mahomes? Some coworkers of mine were even saying stuff along the lines of, he is the LeBron James of kind of the NFL this day and age, but he's not quite Michael Jordan, who a lot of people consider the GOAT. I'm not too big on basketball, so if that's a comparison you agree and or disagree with, fire away. I would love to hear about that as well. But I'm curious to see just kind of what you all think about that and where it puts Patrick Mahomes. Does this mean that Mahomes, when it's all said and done, can get no higher than number 2, which is some of the ugly losses in the Super Bowl he's had in the biggest stages, and obviously one of them being to Tom Brady himself? I think, in my personal opinion, I'm going to settle on, I don't think he can get higher than number 2. He's still got to win 4 rings to even match the number that Brady has. And on top of that, with the head-to-head loss and now another ugly blowout where it felt like even with some struggles along the offensive line, it felt like he was trying to do more than he probably should have in certain situations. It felt like he completely lost sight of the field fairly early in the game on top of that. And fair enough, pressure was pretty heavy, but curious to hear what you all think there. Now, we'll put the Chiefs aside for a second because we'll look at them in a minute. I want to just talk the Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. And like I had said, a dominant display, one that it's hard to put into words because there were so many things about this performance from Philadelphia's defense that you can take away and highlight and just and gush over because it was incredible from start to finish. But just Brandon Graham's return alone, even if he didn't have the wildest impact on the game because he's coming off of a triceps injury that was supposed to have knocked him out for the remainder of the season. He literally said goodbye to Eagles fans when the tricep injury first initially happened. But the fact that he was even able to suit up for this game and get on the playing field and have some sort of an impact for this Philadelphia Eagles defense in its own right is incredible. And I think it all starts there. Having a guy like him who was there for that last Super Bowl victory, one of 4 guys, I believe, that are remaining from that Super Bowl team in 2017, to come back for this game and show everybody just how important it is. I think it gave the Philadelphia Eagles just that extra oomph on top of having to listen to Dynasty talk all week regarding the Chiefs. The 4-man rush, though, that we have to highlight: Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat, who led the team with 2.5 sacks, and of course Milton Williams as well in that rotational role with 2 sacks in his own right. This pass rush was incredible, and one of the things I highlighted in the preview of this game here for Philadelphia was being able to create that pressure in making Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable in this game. If you can get into his face and you can get him to flush out of the pocket more often than he would like to, it feels like at times Mahomes does stop seeing the field, and it felt like that happened in this game, and it happened extremely early. It literally took until 2 minutes and 3 seconds left in the third quarter for the Chiefs to even take a snap on Philadelphia's side of the football field. That's just how rattled Mahomes was and just how ineffective they made this offense. And it all started with those big guys up front there. And that's what you get when you go and you spend 3 first-round picks on 3 different guys on that defensive front. And of course, Josh Sweat, he's a 4th-round selection who has evolved into one of the best pass rushers on that defense now. And I'll be curious to see what happens with him because he is a free agent. And this is somebody whose time in Philadelphia was kind of up in the air, like a year or so ago. So I'm really curious to see what they wind up doing with him. But I think Josh Sweat, 4th-round pick, a guy that is not quite with the draft pedigree alongside the other guys that he played on that defensive line with, but just an unbelievable unit from one side all the way to the other side, literally monsters at the line of scrimmage on the defense. And then, of course, Cooper DeJean on his 22nd birthday going for his first career interception. And what better way to do it than in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, and let alone it be an interception, but a pick 6 on top of that. Happy birthday to Cooper DeJean. That is probably the absolute best possible way a corner can celebrate their birthday in the NFL. Pick 6 against one of the greatest that a lot of people consider of all time, or second at least at this point now with the way things have kind of shaped themselves out following this game. And then you look at a guy like Zach Bond, free agent signing, essentially a special teams guy coming into Philadelphia, winds up netting himself a first-team All-Pro. He has an interception on Patrick Mahomes as well in this game, and he has just been so crucial to what this defense has done in the middle of that unit there. This team is so impressive, and it really is incredible to see just how many draft picks coupled with free agent signings from this past year alone that made such a major impact. We talked Cooper DeJean, obviously, but of course, like, you have Quinion Mitchell on that defense as well. And then guys that they have just been going and getting in the draft year after year that have just slowly evolved into these monsters over the last few years, especially on that D-line. And then you have those guys like Zach Bond coming in here and making an impact for this defense. Gardner Johnson as well in the back end of that defense, the safety spot as well. Like, there's just so much to like about the way this defense was built in Philadelphia. And again, another one of those things where I'm sitting here in hindsight, like, shame on me for not going with this team, because they are built the right way through the draft with a complementary piece here or there that really rounds out the defensive unit. And you cannot praise what this team did defensively this year enough. It has just been incredible to watch. And this is a defense that last year, if you remember, at the tail end of the year, was arguably the worst against, like, the pass and the run. They were one of the worst defenses at the end of last season, and even really struggled those first few weeks of the season before getting it together. And then after that 2-2 start, it's like a switch just kind of flipped. Everyone sort of figured it out. Some people got moved around with where they were playing, and off to the races they went. This Eagles team went on to lose just one more game from that point forward. I cannot stress enough how important defense is right now, especially with the way offenses are given every opportunity and then some to go out and put points on the board. And the Philadelphia Eagles in 2025 sure enough showed you that defense absolutely wins you a championship. The offense, very interesting story, I would say, coming out of the Super Bowl, because you look at Saquon Barkley, 25 carries, 57 yards, 2.3 yards per attempt. I've really got to give Sirianni credit for the way this worked out, and Kellen Moore as well, because you committed to a running game that all season long has been gashing opponents. And for what it's worth, Steve Spagnuolo has not been allowing running backs to run the football effectively, especially when it comes to playoff games. And they had a game plan, and they executed it and shut down Saquon Barkley. But the fact that they stuck to running the football, forcing the Chiefs defense at all times to stay honest and open up some things in the passing game is, again, all the more reason why you should be giving this coaching staff, Nick Sirianni, especially considering how many people were calling for his head coming out of last season, throughout the offseason, into this season, out of that 2-2 start that they had at the beginning of the year. People were betting on him to be the first head coach in the NFL this season to lose his job. And here he is standing at the mountaintop with Philadelphia's second championship win. And that noise was loud after that 2-2 start. So I really have to give credit where it is due, despite the fact that your running game that was so successful all season long basically got shut down in every way imaginable. The fact that they still went and had Saquon carry the ball 25 times to keep the defense honest. Like, talk about committing to your game plan and committing to what your offense is all about, even if it's not going well, because you know you have to stay honest to what you do to keep that defense honest. On the flip side, though, Jalen Hurts, this is so well deserved. And this is the reason why, because there has been so much flack gone Jalen Hurts' way, especially within like the last year or so. People talking about how he's not a good passer and he's not a great quarterback. And, you know, when you talk like elite quarterbacks in the NFL, Jalen Hurts is always getting left off the list. But if there's one thing that Jalen Hurts does that's honestly better than just about all those guys that are always talked about above him, sans like Patrick Mahomes at this point right now, he wins. He wins. And at the end of the day, that is what matters most. He has taken this team to the playoffs all 4 years as a starter. They are constantly in contention. He made it to one Super Bowl, and then coming back with a team that was structured fairly differently over the last couple, or restructured, I should say, fairly differently over the last couple of years, making it back and being able to now win the Super Bowl this time around. He also earns himself the Super Bowl MVP that I would say he does rightfully deserve, although I was really hoping to see someone like Josh Sweat on the defensive side get it, because that defense was just unbelievable. But I understand, quarterback-driven league, and 3 touchdowns with nearly 300 total yards of offense. I mean, despite like making that first big mistake, that big interception early in the game, for him to turn it around, just ice in his veins, shake it off, look forward, and then continue on to having 3 scores, and again, nearly 300 yards of offense, well deserved. And another guy that deserves his flowers, and there's a lot of people out there who owe him an apology at this point. I was never one that really doubted anything about his game. Yeah, there were some instances where I was thinking, maybe he wasn't playing at his absolute best. There were things that were imperfect about the Eagles' offense during certain points in the season. I think it was lost on some people, though, that there were certain points in the season where their offense was a little banged up and they were missing guys game to game, important guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith at certain times. So it never was really lost on me that was going on. But I feel like some of the just disrespect and just flat out discrediting that Jalen Hurts gets, all things considered, having made his second Super Bowl appearance now, and this time coming away with a victory. And again, being the first quarterback to beat the opposing quarterback he already faced in the Super Bowl once before, and then getting the win the second time around, is monumental. History-making win for Jalen Hurts. Hats off to him. Super Bowl MVP, Lombardi championship, that picture of him sitting on the ground smoking the cigar with the Lombardi. I mean, congrats, man. Just absolute congratulations. Now, on the flip side, we do have to look at the Chiefs and just kind of where they go from here. I will say that, like we had kind of talked about earlier, Patrick Mahomes now 3-2 in the Super Bowl. Both these losses, a combined 71-31 as far as scoring is concerned. I mean, you want to talk about just absolute beatdowns. My goodness. I mean, it was not Mahomes' best year by any means, and for somebody who really cleaned it up in the second half, and that offense as a whole in that second half of the season, from week 11 on, they literally had just 1 turnover, and it was against the Bills in the playoffs. And then, of course, you come into this game, 2 massive turnovers from Patrick Mahomes. Or interceptions, I should say. I'm not too worried about him per se. He is still one of the best in the NFL, or if you want to argue, he is still the best in the NFL. I guess that conversation is there to be made. But it was an imperfect year for the offense as a whole, himself included, and one of those things where you have to wonder. And this is not me questioning the competitive nature of Patrick Mahomes, but if there was maybe some complacency that settled into this Chiefs team at some point. I mean, you go back-to-back Super Bowl wins, then you have a 15-2 season where one of your losses is a game that you didn't even try to win to begin with. So you basically had one loss all year where you were trying to win a football game coming into this one here. And then you see stuff like Mahomes and his wife going out with Kelsey and Taylor Swift. And again, I'm not sitting here questioning anyone's drive, determination, or anything like that, but there are some things that popped up that if someone's questioning, maybe there is some complacency, I can at least see where they're coming from. It's things that I'm already, or have been hearing over the last few days, and it was brought up a lot after the game as well from what I've seen. So there is that. You have to wonder, is this going to be the retool, refuel type deal? Maybe they come away from this loss a better team. I would hope so. You also have Travis Kelce's potential retirement now looming over the team as well. Tough game for Kelce. Couple of really big drops on third down. You got one from DeAndre Hopkins as well. It just felt like this offense was out of sync and out of rhythm, and those early drops and mistakes and just lack of rhythm overall really hurt this team. And while I don't want to say that this past year was a bad year for Travis Kelce, I guess it would be considered like a down year for his standards per se. He doesn't seem like he's maybe as quick as he used to be, and it's one of those things where you have to stay sharp and you have to stay on top of absolutely everything as you start to age at this point in the career, especially at his position, if you want to be able to stay ahead and stay effective. So I'll be curious to see what happens there, but if he does go, the tight end room does look a little bit thin in my eyes. Like, yes, Noah Gray is the guy behind him. I don't really know if he's going to be able to step up and be a legit starting tight end there. And it feels like if they do lose Kelce, there is a lack of leadership that they're going to be missing as far as receiving options go. And they're going to have to really figure that out there, because I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. Marquise Brown, maybe they opt to bring him back again. I don't really know what happens with him as well, but there is a potential for the receiving options on this team altogether that winds up looking completely different. But Travis Kelce's potential retirement, I think, is the one that's looming the greatest. The good news is, though, this team's built very well, especially through the draft. I don't really have any concerns about this Chiefs team being able to retool this offseason, reset, and try to run it back again for another appearance in the Super Bowl. I mean, they continue to pay the guys that they need to pay, that they go out and draft and develop. And I mean, you look at the way this team is filled right now. It's very, very few complimentary free agent signings, but it's littered with draft selections from the first round down to the very last round of every single draft, where you have guys contributing at all levels of the defense, whether it's the defensive side going from like Chris Jones to Trent McDuffie to George Karlaftis, Nick Bolton, Jalen Watson. You got Brian Cook, I mean, Xavier Worthy, Trey Smith, Isaiah Pacheco, just to name a handful of guys there. Rashee Rice, who obviously didn't play in this game, who you probably really wish you had in this game. This team has no issue drafting and developing and paying the guys that need to be paid to stick around. So I'm not super worried about them retooling, but the big thing that I see, left tackle needs to be addressed. I feel like that's something that's kind of been an issue for, honestly, both tackles in my eyes have been kind of an issue for the Chiefs. I don't really know how I feel about Jawan Taylor and his issues with getting penalized as much as he does on the right tackle spot for the Chiefs. And then just his performance overall, I would say is like average at best, and that's not a great place to be. And then the left tackle spot, obviously, you go into this game here, you have Joe Thuney playing left tackle for you, and that's not exactly what you want to have coming into this game here. He is supposed to be your left guard, and he is supposed to be on the interior of that O-line. If there's somebody I had to pick to start left tackle because of the situation that the Chiefs were in, obviously, I'd probably go with Thuney, but it's just one of those things that you don't really want to have to deal with. So I definitely think left tackle and potentially even right tackle need to be addressed in some way. The wide receiver room, as I kind of alluded to before, is definitely going to need to see some retooling as well. Obviously, Rashee Rice coming back will be good. Xavier Worthy had himself a pretty nice game, going north of 150 off of 8 catches and a couple of touchdowns as well. Granted, garbage time score later in the game, but he still managed to get the job done on a really big stage there for a rookie wide receiver at that, so credit is due where it is due. But, I mean, this is just one of those things where this was probably a bit of a wake-up call for the Chiefs, I would assume, and they got away with a lot this year, but they kept finding ways to win, and I don't like taking away from teams that find ways to win simply because they're skating by. And you can say what you want about this Chiefs loss and the way things kind of shook out at the end and that they finally got what was coming to them, but good teams do find ways to win, and they did for a large majority of the season, coming up in really big spots to secure those W's. So while this was a really tough loss going up against an Eagles team that looked like an absolute juggernaut, I would expect Kansas City retools, resets, and runs it back again. I would be completely shocked if this team isn't fighting in the AFC Championship again come next year, and maybe even representing the AFC in the Super Bowl again, because for what it's worth, yeah, you got blown out in the Super Bowl, but the Chiefs run the AFC as far as I'm concerned, and have for the better part of the last 6 years at this point now. So until somebody can thwart them, aside from that 1 year that the Bengals got the better of them, this is the Chiefs' conference to lose. So I expect them to retool and run it back, but they do definitely have some areas of need that need to be addressed. And I'm going to assume that this might have been a potential wake-up call if there maybe was a little bit of complacency settling in. But overall, I thought it was, it was definitely the Super Bowl, not a tight game. I really wish it was a little bit closer. Upset with myself that I didn't pick the Eagles to win, considering I held them in such high regard all season long, but I'm happy for the Eagles getting a big W, and Jalen Hurts, again, just well-deserved, the MVP award, being able to, sit back and just kick back and relax. Saquon Barkley going to a new team after being in what has been a dumpster fire of a Giants organization since he got there, and being able to win a Super Bowl in his first go. Awesome for him as well. And Devontae Smith, shout out to him. First Alabama player to ever score a touchdown. Obviously, it doesn't count with Jalen Hurts having scored prior to that, because you don't credit the touchdown to the quarterback. You credit the touchdown to the receiver. So, again, weird wrinkle with how that whole thing works itself out. But congrats to Devontae Smith, first Alabama player to score a touchdown for him. But yeah, exciting season, fun finish. Eagles getting it done just with defensive dominance, and I think the biggest takeaway from this game is that defense is absolutely, even in 2025, with top-flight offenses everywhere you can imagine, in this massive shift towards the running game that we got this year, defenses absolutely still win you championships in 2025, and you look no further than what this Philadelphia Eagles team did. So I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts, my reactions, my takeaways. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. The offseason is up next. We've got so much to get into. Free agency will be a hot topic of discussion. We're going to see players start to get let go. There's news about Aaron Rodgers departing from the Jets, players being thrown around in the trade market. Myles Garrett, of course, was a big name that came out last week. Micah Parsons is somebody that's being rumored as well. Cooper Kupp is going to be on the move. So there is plenty that we'll be getting into all offseason long. We'll be talking, I plan on doing mini series regarding something along the lines of maybe the top 10 teams or so with cap money for free agency, maybe something along the lines of the top 10 teams with the top draft picks. There's a handful of things we'll be doing as we roll through the duration of the offseason. We'll be talking more news and things like that. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you are. But again, if you made it to the end, as always, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.